Hi guys, welcome to the next video. We are now on video 5, and in this video I'm going to discuss poetic devices. I'm not going to go into um, your specific poems just yet. I'll do that later, but let's just go over everything that you are expected to know when you do poetry. So once again, in the Afrikaans helpertjie that I shared with you at the beginning of the year, there is a section called Digkuns, and there we have the poetic devices, and then I've also added some imagery. So let's just go to the SAGS document. Let me show you what we are allowed to ask when it comes to poetry. So these are the things that we can ask in seen poems and unseen poems, and you are supposed to know it all every time and be able to apply it every time. So this is section C, poetry. So this is how it looks in the SAGS document, and this is how we use it. So remember, these videos are only for IEP schools. It will be different if you are at a CAP school. Some things you might be able to use if you move to a different curriculum, but this is mostly based on the IB, Afrikaans Second Language. So this is what the SAGS document gives the teachers, and this is what we're allowed to ask. So we're going to go through a list of words that you should know the meaning of and you should be able to identify. You're not allowed to be asked anything else. So even if you get asked something and the answer could be something else, that answer is not allowed to be in the memo because it's not something that is in the SAGS document. So it says you will get your contextual questions about 2 of your prepared poems. So in matric, you will have 12 and you have to study all 12. So if you pay attention throughout the year, you go home, you revise the poem. There's multiple videos available on YouTube about the poems. I will share the links with you on Google Classroom of those poems. I think I have for most of you already. These are only for the matric poems. So all the poems we do in the other grades, I will make some videos for you. So then you have your contextual questions about 2. So from I actually start doing this with my grade 9 students already, but from grade 10, your tests and exams look exactly the same as in matric. All 3 years in your further education and training phase, grade 10 to 12, your tests and exams will look the same. So you'll always get 2 seen poems and 1 unseen poem. Each poem are worth 10 marks. So it'll be this section or with 30 marks. So the types of questions that will be based on these texts will test the following skills. Vaardighede is skills. Okay. I don't know why I drew the line over the word now. Okay, so vaardighede, that is skills. So what's the skills that I am testing? So we can ask general questions that will evaluate if you can interpret this poem accurately and sensibly. So interpretation, that is things that's given to you during the analysis. You have analysis and summaries of the poems in multiple places. So if you've worked through all of that, the interpretation of the poem will be easy because you will already know what the poem is about when you enter your test or your exam session. The unseen poem is a little bit more tricky, especially if you haven't been working vigorously on your vocabulary skills. Then we will look at these terms. So these are the only words that can be highlighted and asked in a test, or your exam. So it'll be irony, repetition, ellipse, that's the 3 dots in Afrikaans. You got your euphemism of versagting, that means softening. So we will look at the definitions when I move over to my Afrikaans helpertjie. I have all the definitions and examples typed out there for you. Then you get your hyperbole of hyperbole. Oordrywing means exaggeration. Enjambment. So in English, you also get run-on lines, which is if it's just one line going over to a next line without punctuation is run-on lines. And if it's more with more lines without punctuation, it's enjambment. But that's not how it is in Afrikaans. We just have enjambment when there's just one line going into a next line without punctuation, it's an enjambement. Or if it's more, it's also enjambement. Then you have elisie, kontras, retoriese vrae, klank, nabootsing of onomatopoeia. You have to know the two words because I can ask either or. You won't get both necessarily in a question. I can ask identifiseer klank, nabootsing in strofe 2 of identifiseer onomatopoeia in strofe 2. You can get either or. So you need to know dan het ons progressie or regressie. You can also maybe get. Dan het ons paradox, oxymoron, woordspeling en inversie. So we will look at the definition of these more in detail. You won't get any other words apart from the ones that we are going to read now. So you need to know the difference between assonansie and alliterasie. That is asked a lot. When you are asked alliterasie of assonansie, and I'll ask you to identify it. Kom ons sê die woord is baie I'm blank now. I'll think of a different example. I'll have examples in the analysis in my Afrikaans helpertjie. Then there'll be better examples. I can think of something right now. Sorry. But we'll look at some ones now. Very important here is they can also ask you the word halfrym. Because assonansie and alliterasie, it all has to do with the beat of a poem. So if there's more assonance, it's a slower beat. If it's alliteration, it's a faster beat. If there's short vowels, it can also be faster. If it's long vowels, it can also be slower. It has to do with the beat. So with the second, think of when you are listening to rap, okay? There's always a beat. Sometimes they will twist and turn and change some word. Even in sometimes a sentence, it's not grammatically correct. It's not really how you would, if you're just having a conversation and you want to sound grammatically correct, you won't necessarily put a sentence in the word order that it is sometimes in rap songs or in just songs. So alliteration and assonance. If you repeat, for instance, a B, B, B sound throughout a song, it adds to rhythm. It adds to rhyme. But it's not every word or every second word or at the end or a word at the end of every line rhymes. It's as if it's not a full rhyme, but it does add to beat, and adding or repeating a B, B, B or T, T, T throughout a poem or a song, it adds to rhyme, but only kind of. So dit is hoekom dit net half rhyme is, because it's just kind of adding to the rhyme. It's not fully or completely adding to the rhyme, which is full rhyme, which we will get to now. So rhyme schemas and rhyme patroon, that's the full rhyme that you get. So that is if you have your line 1, 2, 3, 4, you have your whole line and then the last word, your whole line and the last word, your whole line and the last word. So it's sort of like it completes it. So it's fully completed rhyme. So it's this last word. So whenever I ask identify rhyming words, I don't want you to just find any random words in the poem that rhyme. No. Whenever I ask you questions about rhyming words, you are looking at these words here at the end of the poem. All right. Or at the end of lines in the poem. So, what you need to know about rhyme schema and rhyme pattern, this is also emphasized in the helpertjie. We will look at it now. But you have your rhyme schema. That is your AABB. In this example, we'll look at more in a bit now. So you have that A, and it's this pattern with a A that I want you to identify. Then you have your rhyme patroon. So that little N there stands for name. So what's the name? In this case, the name is bar rhyme. So we'll look at the list now that you have to study and memorize. Other vocabulary that I can ask in your exam is to identify beeldspraak. Then you need to know beeldspraak is vergelyking, metafoor, personifikasie en simbool. Or I can ask you identify vergelyking, metafoor, personifikasie of symbol. But you need to understand that the word, if I ask you the word beeldspraak in a question, you need to know it can be any of those four things and you should be able to identify it. Or I can ask you one of the four things specifically. It can be asked either way. Then you need to understand the difference between the vorm and the soort. So the form of the poem, that is if you look at the poem. And dan the soort, this is after you've read the poem, the feeling that you get, the type of rhyme that they've used, and basically the theme of the poem can sometimes link to the sort or type of poem. So a form is you look at the build. If you just look at it without understanding anything that's going on inside the poem, you just look at it and you can immediately identify things. Like you can immediately see that this poem, for instance, there's no words, not these words. None of these words here at the end rhyme. So, what type of poem? What is the form of this poem? Dit is 'n vrye vers. Okay? Then or you can immediately look at the poem and you can see there's 8 lines and 6 lines. Without understanding anything, there's 2 stanzas, 8 lines, 6 lines. This makes it a sonnet. So yes, I know in English you go more in detail between the Italian sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet. It doesn't matter. If there's 14 lines in Afrikaans, it's okay. You just need to know it's a sonnet. If there's 14 lines, it's a sonnet. But you can immediately identify that without reading the poem. And then after you've read the poem, you know what's on the inside of the poem, what's in the lines, what's in the content. Then you can say it's a ballad or it's a love song or it's something sad. Then you only know what type of poem this is. But the form is if you look at the poem. The soort is after you've read the poem. Okay. A type of poem you can say, so after you've looked at the form, you immediately see there's nothing rhyming, so it's free verse. So it is a free verse poem. Also a type of poem. Just like a sonnet is a type of poem based on the structure and the form of this poem, because there's 8 lines, 6 lines, or there's a total of 14 lines, that makes it a sonnet. So a sonnet is a type of poem. Just like a sonnet, free verse can also be a type of poem. So we'll also check, it's not just no rhyme scheme that makes a poem free verse. There's other things also that makes a poem free verse. And then some little tips that you know you should never ever expect is they will never give you two poems and ask you to compare the two poems. You are not penalized on language, any like language errors or grammar errors. If it makes sense, you'll get the mark. Okay. So let's look at my Afrikaanse helpertjie. Let me just zoom out, then it's quicker for me to get there. So in your index, 'n noodopgawe, it is section D, Digkuns, and this is on page 101. So let's zoom out so that we can just quickly go to page 101. You have access to all of this. On this whole thing is uploaded on Google Classroom. So you have it all. So dit is hierso. Okay. So if it just loads, then we can quickly do this. Okay, so there's your section D. It's on page 101. So let's go through this. This is things you have to study. You will never be asked what define irony. You'll never be asked that. You will ask, identify the irony in the stanza or in this line. And then you have to explain why these lines or these words or this statement or whatever is ironic. You will never be asked, give the definition. I have seen they have asked the definition of free verse before, but it is apply it. But if you can apply it, you can formulate something. But it's like 1% out of 99% that they will ask you for a definition. We mostly focus on the interpretation. Identify the irony, interpret the irony, or why is this being repeated? Evaluate this technique for me. So a versreël of 'n reël, that's a line in a poem, 'n reël in 'n gedig, 'n strofe. Guys, when you are busy with poetry, it's never a paragraph. Okay, dis 'n strofe. So it's the bunch of lines together, then there's a space, then there's a bunch of lines together. So I said, yeah, it's a paragraph in a poem. But if we are busy with poetry, we call it a strophe, right? You need to know if a stanza consists out of 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines. What do we call it? Because they all have names. We'll get to it. It is, yeah. Then, so irony. That is when you say the opposite of what you mean. And it can sometimes be for humor also. So, an example of this, it has been raining now for 3 days. So, you like every day you haven't had a jacket and an umbrella there because it wasn't supposed to rain, but it's been raining for 3 days now. So, now I'll take a jacket and an umbrella, and now the sun is shining. The day that I have my jacket and my umbrella there, it's not raining and the sun is shining. That's irony. So we also have a poem called Exi Perfecti that I do with some of my grades. There's irony in there because of how the family looks so perfect, but behind closed doors, the daughter has bulimia. So it's kind of ironic that they're actually not so perfect as you think. It's ironic that this girl that's in this very perfect family is bulimic. She has self-image issues, right? Dan het ons herhaling, repetition. Please use the word herhaling. You can use the word repetitie, but herhaling is so much nicer. And so it's just it's a pretty Afrikaans word done as repetitie, as wat repetitie is. Okay? So that's when certain words or parts of sentences, as sinsnedes, parts of sentences are being repeated. Why? What is the function of repetition? It is either for emphasis, beklemtoning, of dit is om die gedig soos 'n liedjie te laat klink. So sometimes if it's a lyrical poem, so that's 'n digsoort, 'n lyrical poem, 'n lyriek. So please don't ever, when I ask why, hoekom is daar herhaling, don't just write om te beklemtoon. You guys have gotten it into your head that it is an hilarious phrase, and the teacher should be so proud of you if you know om te beklemtoon. If you don't know, if when in doubt, write om te beklemtoon. I'm very sorry, but that is only accepted up until grade 9 if you are lucky. After that, we expect you to think further. Why is emphasis in this case important? Why is the poet emphasizing this? Why is this being repeated? Why does the poet want to emphasize this? Yes, it is for emphasis, but what? What is he trying to emphasize? What's the poet trying to emphasize through this? So you need to be able to elaborate. You can start your sentence with om te beklemtoon, but then you need to elaborate. So remember, if you start with om te beklemtoon, that's an infinitive. Then straight after, you need to go into your subject, verb 1, your time, your object, your manner, your place, your verb 2. That will be the format or the structure of your sentence. So sure, use that to start your sentence, but just writing that is not sufficient and you will not get the mark. If I ask you, why is the poet repeating this phrase? So I can ask you what phrase is being repeated, then you write down, or what line is being repeated, or what word is being repeated, you write it down. That's great. Then if I ask you, but why is the poet repeating this? Om te beklemtoon is an insufficient answer. Okay, it's not funny, it's not sufficient. You need to elaborate, you need to feed your critical thinking skills in that question. It will be a level 4 or up question depending on the difficulty of the interpretation. Ellipse, that's when you leave words out that was supposed to be there. It's words that the poet is supposed to fill in. That the reader is supposed to fill in themselves. So the policeman nods and then do 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 do. But that is, you can imagine or think, ooh, any ending, what could happen next? It's like an open ending to think for dramatic effect. But it can also literally just mean the poet put the ellipse there because he wants you to fill in something there that is relevant to you as the individual reader. Dan het ons euphemism of versagting, euphemisme of versagting. So that is when you make a situation sound softer than what it actually is. So it's something that's usually, if you are going to be just straight and honest, it's going to be sound harsh or mean. So you're trying to say it nicer and soft, trying like to be gentle in this case, like especially when a girl asks you if something makes her look fat. Like you're going to have to like count your words to try and not make it sound harsh, but you also don't want them to think they look good in something when they really don't. Or if a loved one passed away, there's like certain words you'll use in that situation and certain words you will not, because it will just sound terrible and horrible and cruel. So then you try and soften the vocabulary that you use to make it sound less bad than what it really is. So in this case, you just say someone has long fingers instead of saying they're a thief. Or this person went to heaven, or permanently went on holiday, instead of saying they dead, for instance. Okay, then we have a hyperbole or exaggeration. This is something that people love to do. So that's obviously when you are exaggerating or make something sound bigger or worse than it is. So when you're not answering your phone and your mom finally gets hold of you and she's like, the whole world was looking for you. No, you don't know everyone in the whole world, but it's just to make a point. Like it was a lot of people that was looking for you. Then I asked you 100 times now to do this, or 1,000 times. I've warned you 1,000 times. There's no way, like, it could have been less. It just felt like a lot. Like how I feel sometimes when I teach you, that I've repeated myself 1,000 times and you still haven't gotten it. But I've only done it maybe like 3 or 4 times, which is still a lot. You guys should get it on the second time at most. Okay? Dan het ons die injambement. I already touched on that earlier. So that is when a line goes into another line without punctuation or any disruption. So it's not a comma. It's not any like an exclamation mark, a full stop, an ellipse. There's just no punctuation. Then also, if it's from one stanza to another stanza, there's been an interruption. So why is there enjambment? What is the goal of enjambment? It is to make the beat faster. Dit is om die tempo van die gedig te beïnvloed en om emosie weer te gee. So to influence the tempo so that some sort of an emotion can be transferred to the reader. So it either hides rhyme or softens rhyme, because you have to read it as one. It's not like stop, 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 stop. So the rhyme is less obvious. Obviously, it influences both the tempo and the rhythm. Then it can help if, let's say, you want to make a point of a school day. Let's say you write a poem about a day in school. Then enjambment and yambament would be very appropriate, because there's no full stop. It can create the illusion or the message that it's like just going on and on and on and on and on and on. So that's then a technique. So it'll help with the flow. And then obviously, let's say you go from a line to another line without punctuation, or from a stanza to another stanza without punctuation. It shows to the reader that these are connected. It's still a continuous thought. Die gedagte gaan aan. Die gedagte het nie gestop nie. The thought didn't stop. Okay, so dit is ook 'n funksie van enjambement. Then you have elisi, that's like illusion, when you have left out some words. Like in English, you'll have until, but you say till. Okay, I'm here till 3:15 every day. Okay? Dan het ons kontras, antithese of teenstelling. All three of those words mean the same thing. So if you see any of those three words in a question, they just want you to know that it's the opposite of the thought that's being expressed. So, like, it's almost sometimes like the quicker you try and do something, the longer you take, because you're just not spending as much time or as much attention on it as it deserves, and it actually ends up taking you longer to get it done. So, also, maybe in a way, irony can sometimes also be expressed through contrast. Then you have your rhetorical questions. That's just a question that I ask, but I don't really expect an answer. Like, how many times must I still ask you to keep quiet or stop talking or listen? Obviously, if you're going to say, 2 more times, then it's going to be super arrogant. I don't expect an answer, but I want you to think about it, because, like, whatever I'm asking you, I want you to think about it. That's a rhetorical question. I don't want you to answer. Then you have your onomatopoeia or klanknabootsing. That's any words that mimic the sound of something. Then you have either your progressie of regressie. It depends. So it can progress in a bad way or a good way. They only ask the word progressie, but in your answers, if regression makes more sense to you, that you are allowed to use it in your answers. Like, there's a matric poem where the girl like first she's a little bit sad, so she's sniffing, then she's crying, and then she's ugly crying. So you can see that as progression or regression, however you want to interpret it, because it's getting worse. Technically, it's not getting better. So you're allowed to use the word regression in your answer, but they'll most likely just ask progression, which means it's growing in a bad direction or growing in a good direction. Then you have your paradox. That's just when you say something to make a point, but it's actually the opposite. You're trying to make a point. Like, to tell you the truth, I'll have to lie if I answer that. Like, let's say you ask me a question in class, I have no clue, and I'll say, to tell you the truth, I'm gonna lie if I answer that question because I don't know what the answer is. So there's just like a little bit of, you make a statement, and in your statement there's two opposites to prove the point you're trying to make. An oxymoron is when you use an adjective that's the opposite of the noun you are describing, or you use an adverb that is the opposite of the verb. An adverb that is the opposite of the verb that you are describing. So, for instance, you got a second-hand car. It's new to you, but it's technically an old car. So, yes, I got a new car, but it's an old car. So, I got an old new car, or a new old car, or whatever. Or when you say the silence is deafening. So you are using a word that's usually associated by a lot of noise to describe the silence. That's an oxymoron. Then you have word play. That's like a pun. Okay. This is actually a word that can be asked in advertisements also, because many times in the heading or the slogan of an advertisement, there's wordplay, there's a pun. So here's some examples. The diver was shocked deeply by what he found. So the diver went diving very deep into the ocean. He was shocked deeply by what he found. Um, the next one, a eystervark, a porcupine, when he like shoots out his needles and he stabs you. But when you also say, like, let's say there's a friend or someone, they almost must have the last say, but it's always like the stab almost that they need to get in. Then you say the porcupine got in his last stab. But because he shot his needles out, he stabbed you literally. But he also made a point, he got the last stab. So that's like wordplay. And fashi. So this is an important one. In fashi, I have seen come up in exams and unseen poems specifically quite a few times. So in fashi can have two functions. It's always you swapping around the word order in line. That is what it is. You swap around the word order in a line, which makes it grammatically incorrect, but it is for two reasons. It's either to put a word at the beginning of a line because you want that word to be emphasized for some reason. That word or those two words I want it at the beginning of all my lines because that's what my poem is about. Or you can swap the word order so that there's a word at the end of the line so that it fits into a rhyme scheme. Okay, you want this line and this line and this line and this line to rhyme. But if you write all the lines grammatically correct, it won't rhyme. So you have to force words or put words in the sentence in the wrong word order so that it fits into the rhyme scheme of the poem. So you either put a word, so it is swapping word order. So dit is 'n versreel wat op 'n onnatuurlike, and it's unnatural. If you write it like that in an essay or something, it's not going to make sense and you're going to be penalized on grammar. So It is when you swap the word order. That's what's there in brackets. Yeah, that's what's here in brackets. The word order is swapped. Okay. So what's the function? It's either so that the lines can rhyme. So you have swapped words around so that the rhyming words are at the end and it can rhyme. Or it is to emphasize a word or a thought. Then it will be put at the beginning. So in this example, it'll be school. School. There I'm going to die. So it's just for dramatic effect. And to emphasize whatever word you want to emphasize, then you put it first. Or you'll put a word at the end so that it rhymes. So I've repeated it a few times because in fact is really asked quite often. So earlier I was trying to think of an example of alliteration and assonance when I touched on it on the previous page. So whenever I ask you a question about alliteration or assonance, this is how you answer it. You write down the line and you underline whatever part of the word makes it assonance or alliteration. So you can highlight it, underline it, circle it, it doesn't matter as long as you identify it very, very clearly. You cannot underline the whole word. So let's say, for instance, this one right here. This one right here. If you underline the whole word with the A, then you're technically saying it's a va sound, a slaw sound, and a R sound. So then it's technically a W and a SL and a A. So make sure you underline the right parts of the word that makes it alliteration or assonance. If you do not identify it like this, you do not get the mark. So please, please, please. This is very important. I am still, after repeating this so many times in the classroom, I am still getting alliteration and assonance answers where you have not identified what part of that sentence that you just wrote down or line that you just wrote down. Show me that you understand what alliteration is. Show me that you understand what assonance is. That is how you show me. So then you have the speaker. This is the person or the element that is talking in the poem. So the poet and the speaker is not the same. The poet is just the person who wrote the poem. But whatever message the poet is trying to convey, so let's say the poet is trying to, I don't know, the poet is speaking like he's a teenager. Like, I'm so stressed because of school. School is overwhelming me with all these rules and giving me a bad back. So this is an adult writing the poem, most likely. So the speaker is definitely not the poet. The speaker is most likely a teenager or a school child. Or it can be a love poem. They need the the person who is in love who's writing the poem. So anyone who ever feels in love can read this poem and make it their own because they can resonate with it. That's how the speaker and the poet is being differentiated. Then you get your type of poem and your form. So the let's just see. I'm sure they changed this now. No, this is right. I just swapped. It was in the SAGs they first discussed the digvorm and then the digsoort. No, it's right. So the digsoort is you identify the type of poem after you've read the inside, the content of the poem. And the form is like the typography. It's what you see when you just look at it. Right. Then, but like I touched on it earlier, when you look at the poem, and you can immediately see this is a sonnet, there's 14 lines, or you can immediately see this is free verse. There's no rhyme scheme, there's no real capitals, there's no punctuation, so there's a lot of enjambment. So you can see that just by looking at the poem, but that makes it what type of poem it also. So a sonnet en vrye vers, those two can fall both under digsoort and digvorm, because just like looking at the poem, you can already tell what type of poem this is. So without reading it, you already know what type of poem it is. Then here's this you guys must please memorize. I've seen you guys throw away marks over and over and over and over because you are not not memorizing this. So guys, please, this is very important. Go over this. So a paar rhyme, paar is a couple. A paar is a couple. So you'll see there's two. How does this look? It's like you have your line, your whole line of your poem. Dan het jy son. Then you have your line. Dan het jy kon. You could have done this. Dan het jy maar, which is a conjunction, doesn't matter. En dan het jy gaar, or whatever. So see these two rhyme, and then these two rhyme. That makes it paar. That's how you identify it. So sounds get named the same alphabetical letter. Then you have kruisrym. So if you write the A, B, and you say those go, so these two go together, these two. So it's a paar, a couple and a couple. Yeah, if you do this, there's a kruis, a cross, kruisrym. Then you have A, B, I. If you like put it together, it makes a little arm. So I think there's an elbow. So a little arm that you hold someone. Then you have your slagrym. That's the same beat. Slag. Slag is like a loud sound. This is slag. Same beat throughout the whole poem. Then you have your broken rhyme. So broken rhyme means that there's random alphabet letters, but there's still like some sort of a beat because of sounds that is being repeated. So if there's like a B sound in line 2 and then there's a B sound again in line 18, that is not gebroken rhyme, that's free verse. There must be, not every single line has a pattern like in paarrym, kruisrym, omarmde rym en slagrym, but there's still the sounds like you can say every fourth line or every second line of every stanza. You can still identify a pattern in some way, but also not really. Dan is dit gebroken rym. So it's not like AA, BB, CC, DD, AA, CC, GG. Like it's not specific, but it's like you can say, you can give the pattern a name and say every fourth line of this poem rhymes, or every last line of every stanza rhymes. Something like that. You can identify it in some way. Dan is dit gebroken rym. So like I said, if there's like a sound that's rhyming in line 2 and then in line 18 again, but other than that, there's nothing really that rhymes, dan is dit vrye vers. There can be absolutely nothing. It can be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. But you can have like A, B, C, D, E, F, and then a B, and then you go on with all the other alphabet letters again. Just because that sound appeared there twice throughout the whole poem, how are you going to explain it? Or can you say like every fifth line rhymes. Like it's getting too broad, dan is dit vrye vers. All right. Vrye vers can also be identified through, so jy het jou geen rym skema of rym patroon. You have your, or you can have jou min tot geen leestekens, punctuation. So there's quite leestekens. So there's quite a lot of injambement. Or you can have min tot geen hoofletters, because there's no punctuation, no full stops, no exclamation marks, then there won't be any capital letters. Okay. Let me just see if I've added it here, or is it maybe something that I should add for you guys? Just go down and see. Actually looks like I haven't put that in, but I know I've handed out notes for you guys in class where this was definitely, but let's go over it quickly. So jy kan, if you have a stanza with 2 lines, dan is dit 'n couplet. You can have a stanza with 3 lines, dan is dit 'n tersine. You can have a stanza with 4 lines, dan is dit 'n kwatryn. Mostly it's just a kwatryn. Mostly it's a kwatryn in Afrikaans poems. If you have 5 lines, dan noem ons dit 'n quintet. If you have 6 lines, a sextet. 7 lines, not really, but let's just go to 8, because these two together usually make or always make a sonnet. Dan is dit 'n octaaf. But it's usually one of these guys. What if it's one line? Een reël. Then we're going to call that line. It's then a technique called alleenblasing. That line is placed alone, and it will always mean something. So there's always some sort of interpretation that you can do there. But it's usually one of these that's asked, not really 5 lines ever. And then if you have a sonnet, it will be the poem consists out of a octave and a sextet. Right, so that is then Digkuns, and no, it's not. We still have to go over this one. So then you also have your beeldspraak, your vergelyking, that's your simile in English. So please don't try this in your Afrikaans test. Dis 'n vergelyking, a comparison. Dan het ons 'n metafoor, look at the F, it's not a PH. Personifikasie, personification. And dan symbol is one that is new, because you guys in younger grades usually only focus on these 3. Symbol. A white dove is the symbol of peace, vrede. A heart, if someone draws a little red heart somewhere, symbol of love. If you see the red cross, that's symbol is medicine or help. If you see a skull drawn on something, that usually means it's poison, gif. So that's all. That's what symbolism means. If you're reading a story and there's a lot of broken objects, for instance, in the story, like either the mirror breaks, or her cell phone breaks, or her microwave breaks, or her glass, she drops her glass or her cup of coffee and it breaks. They like things, objects that break a lot. That can be symbolism of that something that's broken in her life that should be fixed. Things like that. That is symbolism. So yeah, I've just like this is some things that I've noticed that you guys don't do. So remember when you are asked identify the alliteration to make sure that you highlight the repeated sounds. And then remember if you are asked rhyme schema, it's that A that makes it AABB. And if you are asked the rhyme patroon, paarrym, then it is naam benoem, noem of genoem. So look at this question here. So even though I ask rhyme schema in the question, you have the word benoem. That tells me, give me the name of the rhyme scheme. The name of the rhyme scheme is paarrym. So that's just like a little something that I added there because I've seen you guys make many errors. And then that's it. Right. So I will go into more detail of some of your poems with some analysis for some of the poems we did in class. The 12 metric poems are already on YouTube. I think there's definitely two separate channels that have analyzed all the poems, but there might have been some new added in the meantime. So please watch that and read through the analysis. And to my matric students, I have already given you hard copies of extra additional summaries that I've made. And then please go over this. If you need to go back on anything, just go back in the video or go have a look at my Afrikaans helpertjie or any additional notes that I have given you in class. Right, guys? That's it for video 5.